I live in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Ohio. It's one of those peaceful places where people go jogging at night, where neighbors know each other's names, and where most folks don't worry about locking their doors during the day. That kind of false sense of safety, I had it too, until one night changed everything. It was mid-October, just starting to get chilly. My parents were visiting my aunt in Chicago for the weekend and left me alone at home. I was 17, old enough to take care of myself, and to be honest, I was looking forward to having the house to myself. I had plans, scary movies, junk food, and just relaxing without anyone around. That Saturday night, I started watching a horror film around 10:30 p.m. I remember laughing at how unrealistic it was. Bad acting, dumb characters doing dumb things. But around 12:30 a.m., I paused the movie to grab a soda from the kitchen. That's when I noticed it. Our back porch light was on. It's one of those motion detecting lights that only turns on when something moves near it. At first, I assumed it was a cat or maybe a raccoon, but something in my gut told me to take a look. I slowly walked over to the kitchen blinds that cover the back door and peeked through. My heart nearly stopped. There was a man standing on our back porch, stealing, staring straight at the door like he was listening for movement inside the house. He wore a dark hoodie and jeans, his face mostly hidden in shadows, but I could see the bottom half of his face. He wasn't just loitering, he was waiting. I stepped back quickly, turned off the kitchen light, and crouched behind the counter. I peeked again, barely lifting a corner of the blind. He was still there. But now, he was smiling. Then came the sound that nearly made me drop my phone. Click, click. He was trying the door handle, slowly, patiently, like he was testing it, hoping it was unlocked. It wasn't. Thank God. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands and called 911. Whispering, I told the operator there was a man trying to get into my house. She told me to stay hidden and quiet. Officers were already on their way, but things were far from over. While I was whispering to the operator, I heard the sound of leaves crunching. He was walking along the side of the house. I rushed to the living room window and ducked behind the couch. And then I saw him again. He was at the living room window now, peering in. He moved window to window, slowly circling the house like a predator. At one point, he even got down on all fours, trying to look through the basement windows. The 911 operator stayed on the line, guiding me to stay hidden. But I made a horrifying realization: the garage. My dad always kept the side garage door locked, but I remembered I had taken out the trash earlier and might have left it open. Worse, the interior door, the one that connects the garage to the kitchen. I wasn't sure if I had locked it. Suddenly, from the back of the house, the garage door. He had gotten inside. My blood ran cold. I ran to the kitchen door leading to the garage and locked it, literally seconds before the handle turned. He was on the other side. I could hear him breathing. No banging, no yelling, just breathing. Then suddenly, boom, boom, boom. He started pounding the door so hard I thought it would crack. I screamed without realizing it. Then silence. Complete silence. That was somehow worse. I turned to run upstairs when I heard the unmistakable sound of glass shattering. One of the living room windows had been smashed in. I bolted up the stairs and locked myself in the bathroom. My hands were trembling as I held the phone, still connected to the 911 operator. I heard him moving through the house, slow, deliberate footsteps. He wasn't rushing. He was enjoying this. I heard drawers opening, cabinets creaking, furniture being dragged slightly across the floor. The operator told me the police had just arrived and were surrounding the house. Then, silence again, more footsteps. Outside my bedroom door now. He was on the second floor. I held my breath as I saw the shadow of feet under the bathroom door. He stopped, stood there. Then the door handle moved, gently, slowly, but it was locked. Then he spoke, barely a whisper. "I know you're in there." Chills ran through my spine, then shouting, heavy footsteps, the sound of officers storming the house. The man ran. I stayed locked in the bathroom until an officer knocked and identified himself. They caught him just as he was trying to escape through the same window he had shattered. He had no ID on him, but he had a large kitchen knife tucked into his waistband. Later, the police told me he had likely been casing houses for weeks, watching which ones were occupied and which weren't. They found zip ties in his jacket pocket. His intent wasn't burglary, and that's what still haunts me. He didn't want to rob us. He wanted someone. Ever since that night, I double-check every lock. I close every blind. I install cameras and lights and still feel that sick feeling in my gut when something creaks at night. Because once someone tries to come into your home, your sense of safe is never the same again. If that story gave you chills, make sure to hit the like button, share it with a fellow horror fan, and subscribe with notifications on. We bring you true, spine-tingling stories every week, and trust me, the next one is even more disturbing. This happened in the summer of 2022 when I had just graduated high school. I had plans to stay with my grandmother in a small town in Michigan for a few months before college started. Her house was a quiet little place. 1 story, 2 bedrooms, a small kitchen and living room, and a fenced backyard that backed up to a patch of thick woods. It was peaceful. The kind of place where you'd hear crickets at night, where the neighbors waved when they mowed their lawns, and where you could fall asleep with the windows open. But I never liked the hallway. It sounds stupid now, but something about the way it stretched from the front door to the bedrooms always creeped me out. It was long and narrow, and the floorboards creaked loudly even if you tiptoed. During the day, no problem, but at night, I avoided walking through it unless absolutely necessary. My grandmother, bless her heart, was in her late 70s. She still did her own gardening and baked every Sunday, but she also had a habit of ignoring noises. If she heard something strange at night, she'd just say, "Probably a raccoon," or "Just the wind, sweetie." One Friday evening in July, she told me she'd be spending the night at her friend Marie's house in the next town over. Marie's husband had recently passed, and my grandma wanted to keep her company. She asked if I'd be okay alone, and I said of course. I'd be watching over her beagle, Murphy. Now Murphy was old, fat, lazy. He spent most of the day napping and would only get up when he heard the fridge door open. He was more like a pillow than a watchdog. That night, after my grandma left, I microwaved some frozen pizza and settled into the living room to binge watch a show on Netflix. Around 10:30, it started raining, a slow, gentle drizzle that made the whole house feel cozier. I remember thinking, perfect night to relax. Around midnight, I got into bed and started scrolling through TikTok like usual. The hallway light was on, and my bedroom door was open. Murphy lay at the foot of my bed, snoring lightly. Then suddenly, he stopped. I noticed his ears perk up. He lifted his head, growled, a deep, quiet growl I had never heard from him before, and then jumped off the bed and ran toward the hallway. Now let me be clear. Murphy never did that. He was the laziest dog on earth. So for him to react that way, it instantly put me on edge. I followed him to the hallway where he stood staring toward the kitchen. His fur was bristled. The hallway light flickered slightly, probably from the rainstorm, but it added to the unease. I whispered, "Murphy, it's okay," trying to calm myself more than him. I walked into the kitchen and checked both doors, the front and back, still locked. The windows were shut. I looked outside, nothing. I told myself maybe Murphy heard thunder or something outside. I picked him up, brought him back to bed, and shut the door this time. 15 or 20 minutes later, as I was half asleep, I heard it. Creak, creak, very soft footsteps, as if someone was moving carefully, inside the house. My first thought was, Grandma came back early, but then I remembered, she had the car. I hadn't heard it pull into the driveway. No doors opened, no voice calling out. Then I heard something that shattered any illusion of safety. A whisper. Very quiet, male voice. "You check the rooms, I'll watch the door." I sat up, fully awake now. My mouth went dry. There were people inside the house. I reached over and turned off the lamp. Murphy, sensing something was wrong, crawled under the bed and started whimpering. I slowly locked my bedroom door, grabbed my phone, and sat on the floor inside the closet. I called 911. My voice shook as I whispered to the dispatcher that there were intruders in the house. She told me to stay calm, stay quiet, and that officers were already being sent. From inside the closet, I could hear everything. The front door never opened, meaning they had come in through the back somehow. The sound of footsteps, rummaging, drawers opening, and then this one's locked. They were at my door. Tap, tap, tap. then jiggling the handle. "You think someone's in there?" My heart felt like it would explode out of my chest. I held my breath for what felt like minutes. Then came the worst moment of all. One of them said, "Let's kick it." Just as they took the first hit, bang! I screamed without meaning to, and Murphy barked. Just then, I heard loud yelling from outside. "Police! Drop your weapons, hands in the air!" Doors slammed, running footsteps. The intruders bolted through the kitchen toward the backyard, but the cops had already covered the back fence. They caught two men, both in their 20s. One had a crowbar, and the other had a hunting knife in his jacket. The scariest part? They weren't just burglars, they'd been targeting elderly homes. The cops said they suspected they'd followed my grandma earlier that day, thinking the house would be empty. They had broken into 3 other homes in the past week. Had Murphy not barked? Had I not locked that door? I don't know what would have happened. I still think about it often. That whisper, "You check the rooms," how close they were, how calmly they moved, how familiar they were with the layout. It still haunts me. After that night, I couldn't stay at my grandma's alone again. She ended up installing a full security system, cameras, motion detectors, everything. But nothing, not even steel locks, can take away the memory of hearing voices in your hallway when you know you're supposed to be alone. This happened 4 winters ago, during my 3rd year of college. I was renting a small, cheap basement apartment at the edge of town, the kind of place most students avoid, cold in the winter, humid in the summer. But it was all I could afford. The apartment was beneath an old Victorian-style house that had been divided into 3 separate units. The top floor was rented to an elderly couple, the middle unit belonged to the landlord, Ron, and the basement was mine. It had its own entrance around the back. A rusty metal staircase led down to a small landing with a narrow wooden door that opened directly into my living space. The entire apartment was no bigger than a motel suite, just a bedroom, a small kitchen, a bathroom, and a living room with stained carpet. But the worst part? The door. It was old, hollow, with a tiny square window that sat at head height. It was covered by a crooked little curtain that barely hung on the rod. No peephole, no security camera, just that one fragile door between me and whatever was outside. The first time I felt uneasy about it was my second night there. I was eating dinner on the couch when I heard what sounded like a knock, just one. I looked toward the door, waited, nothing. I assumed it was the neighbors upstairs, or the pipes, or the wind. You tell yourself anything to feel safe. From that night on, I started jamming a wooden chair under the doorknob before bed, just for peace of mind. It was early December when the real nightmare began. It had snowed heavily that week, and the temperature had dropped below freezing. The roads were slick. My heater barely worked. The apartment felt like a refrigerator. That Thursday night, I worked the late shift at the campus library. I got home around midnight. Everything was dark and silent. I noticed something strange as I walked down the stairs to my door. The curtain on the door's window was slightly raised. It was always closed. Always. I didn't remember moving it. I stood there, frozen in the cold, staring at that tiny piece of uncovered glass. My breath visible in the air. The streetlight barely reached this side of the house, so everything beyond the glass was black. I unlocked the door, quickly stepped inside and locked it again. I pulled the curtain down flat and wedged the chair under the knob. Then I tried to forget it. At 1:37 a.m., I woke up on the couch with the TV still on. A show was playing, but I wasn't watching it. Something had pulled me out of sleep. Not a sound, not a movement, just a shift in the air, a presence. I sat up slowly, then I heard it. Click, click, the sound of metal twisting, softly, carefully. The doorknob was moving. I muted the TV. Now I could hear every creak in the walls, every tick of the heater. Then it stopped. Dead silence. I stood behind the couch, knife in hand, listening. And then, nothing, for a full 5 minutes. I laughed nervously, convinced myself it was the cold metal expanding, pipes groaning, my nerves. I went to bed. Biggest mistake of my life. Around 3:12 a.m. I woke again. But this time I didn't move. Something was off. I felt it before I saw it. The room was too bright. There was a faint glow I couldn't explain. Then I realized the curtain on the door was lifted. Someone was holding it up from outside, and they were watching me. I couldn't see a face, just a shape, a vague outline of a head, perfectly still. I didn't move, didn't even breathe. I stared back, pretending to be asleep, hoping they'd think I hadn't seen them. Then the curtain dropped, and I heard it. Tap, tap, tap. 3 knocks, not loud, not aggressive, polite, like they weren't trying to get in. They just wanted me to know they were there. I backed away slowly and called 911, whispered everything, told them I was in a basement with no back exit. The operator said officers were 5 minutes away. Then I heard it. Scratching. Long, deliberate. Fingernails dragging down the wooden door, then tapping again, and then breathing. I swear on my life, I heard someone breathing through the glass. Slow, measured breaths, right up against the window, and then a whisper. I saw you. I almost dropped the phone. I bolted into the bathroom, locked the door, and crouched in the tub with the knife in my lap. The scratching turned into jiggling. They were testing the lock again. The chair was holding, but for how long? I heard footsteps around the apartment, snow crunching outside each window. Then silence. Not even footsteps anymore. I stayed there in the dark for what felt like hours. Then the 911 operator whispered, "They're outside. Stay where you are." The knock at my front door this time was loud and authoritative. Police. When I came out, they had already searched the property. But the snow, there were no footprints, none on the landing, none near the stairs, not even beneath the window where I'd seen the face. But there were scratches, thin, claw-like scratches running down the door, dozens of them, deep into the wood. Not just fingernails, something else. They told me maybe it was just a prank, a bad dream, someone trying to scare me. But I moved out that week. 2 months later, I was in a bookstore across town and ran into Ron, my old landlord. He asked if I'd ever seen the guy. I asked what guy. He said we had a tenant back in 2011, lived in the same unit. He disappeared one night, left all his stuff behind. Only thing we found were scratches on the inside of the front door and the curtain pulled halfway up. I never looked at doorways the same way again. And if you're ever home alone and you hear a soft knock in the middle of the night, don't look at the door, because sometimes it's not someone who wants to get in. It's someone who's already been watching you for a very long time.